All right. It is so wonderful to see so many colleagues on the phone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you have not yet had a chance to turn on your video, we would love for you to do that. We are going to get started. Now, of course, I tested and tested to make sure my slides would advance. There we go. So we are thrilled that you have joined us for the third session of Research, Reflect, Respond, which is an online series presented by JPRO Network and the Berman Jewish Policy Archive. And we are really lucky to be learning with Professor Sarah Bunin Benor today. I'm Ilana Azen, the Executive Director of JPRO Network. And if we haven't yet met personally, I hope you have the opportunity to soon. So you see here that we are really thrilled to be joined by folks from a diversity of organizations from all over the US and Canada. And that is so wonderful for JPRO because we work across the diversity of the fields. And we're really happy that a diverse group of professionals from over 30 organizations is registered for the program. And we're particularly appreciative to those who organized groups to come together for watching parties. Now here's our agenda for the hour. You see that partway through we're going to be breaking into small groups for discussions, and Zoom has some magic that lets us do this. If you're watching on your own, you're going to meet with 3 or 4 other participants in a virtual breakout room. And if you're watching in person with a group already, you'll discuss together with the group you're with live. If you're in a group and you're not listed here, please let us know in the chat just so that we can organize the breakout groups accordingly. And to make the most of Zoom, it would be great if you would open the chat function now to see a few important technical notes. For those who are new to JPRO Network, I want to take a moment to introduce us. We are the organization of, by, and for everyone who works in the Jewish nonprofit sector in the US and Canada. We work with individuals and the field, and we focus on connecting and learning. Members of JPRO Network have full access to our programming, along with JPRO Online, today's program. We also offer Well Advised, a free advising program, master classes, which are skill-based training, and professional awards. We have a master class upcoming that is a management crash course, and it has just a few open spots left. You can find out more about it on our website, or you can email us at info@jpro.org. We are so happy to be partnering with the Berman Jewish Policy Archive on this series. The BJPA offers a free searchable collection of over 20,000 articles related to the Jewish community to ensure that existing research is easily and instantly accessible to everyone who needs it. And beyond being a research archive, BJPA also works to catalyze new research, analysis, and policy discussions. We are so grateful to Professor Benor for teaching today about the diversity of language, culture, and identity among American Jews. Sarah Bunin Benor is Professor of Contemporary Jewish Studies at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, and Adjunct Professor in the University of Southern California's Linguistics Department. She received her PhD in linguistics from Stanford University in 2004. Today's session is, there we go, now we can all see each other. Today's session is so important to us at JPRO because inclusivity is one of our core values. We strive to serve everyone who works in the Jewish nonprofit sector. This includes Jews of every background and identity and a significant proportion of people of other religions and backgrounds. We're really excited to think about how we use language to signal who we are and who our target audiences are, and how our decisions about language can help build workplaces that are infused with deep and compelling cultures and that are deeply inclusive for each and every one of our colleagues. Welcome and thank you, Professor Benor.
Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. It's really an honor to speak to professionals all around North America. I'm going to share my screen now so you can see my slides. I'm going to be focusing on diversity of the American Jewish community, and there are a lot of ways we can talk about that, but I'm specifically going to be focusing on this through the lens of language. And I'm going to start by reading you some quotes, and I want you to unmute yourselves, or perhaps someone can do that globally. And I want you to answer some questions about these quotes. Who tends to say this quote? I can't believe your grandson Jeremy co-chaired the Federation campaign. He's always been a mensch and now he's a real macher. You must be shepping so much nachas right now. What type of person might say that kind of quote? Just shout it out if you're not muted.
An Ashkenazi grandmother.
There you go, an Ashkenazi grandmother. So you see a lot of words from Yiddish within the English there. How about this one? The sugya we're learning is too lumdish to say outside. Who would tend to say that? Anyone? Oh, I see a chat. Let's see. An Orthodox rabbi. Good. Yeah. So that would be not just a rabbi, but maybe a yeshiva bacher, right? So a young Orthodox man or boy. And then here's the next one. After I was bat mitzvahed, I only went to temple for tikkun olam events. Who would say that?
Me.
Who said that? Erica?
Erica,
Yeah.
grew up conservative.
Okay, yeah. So a young progressive woman, perhaps in the reform movement in particular, but also potentially conservative. And this one, I'm going to call for my nonos meldado. This is a Sephardic Jew, in this case in Seattle. And you see some Ladino words within the English there. I left my kuracha in Knis. Not even sure I pronounced that right. Anyone? So this is a Syrian Jew in Brooklyn. The Gabbai wants to know who's laning the Maftir Aliyah and who's Hagba and Galila. This could be anyone in an independent minyan or a synagogue setting where lay people lead services. I spent the whole party schmoozing up the vice presidents. I must have given my spiel 6 times. So this one uses Yiddish words, but in a distinctly American way. So this could be anyone, not necessarily Jewish, someone in the business world. And finally, in the middle, the coldest weather, he crossed the ice in a little boat. He should catch the British and the missionaries fooling around, not with their minds on the war. Okay, that one is an immigrant. And this is a quote from a book about Yiddish-speaking immigrants. So what's the point of all this? Why am I showing you these quotes? Well, what do they all have in common? And this, I really want you to chime in here. What do all of these quotes have in common?
They exclude people who don't understand them.
Okay, so why do they exclude people who don't understand them? Because they're not just English, right? They're English with distinctive features, but they all have different features. So in this case, they're all Jewish American English, which I see as an umbrella term for ways that Jews in America speak English. And this is not just English, it's also English with distinctive features, including influences from textual Hebrew and Aramaic, modern Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, Russian, Farsi, Arabic, depending on where Jews came from and depending on the community that they live in. So it's not just American Jewish English that is an umbrella term. You could say the same about any ethnic dialect, about Black English or Latino English or Asian English. There's no one variety of these. Each of them has diversity within that dialect. And you could say the same about other Jewish languages, Judeo-Persian, Judeo-French, Yiddish, Ladino, all of these Jewish languages have diversity within them. And I'm going to give you a little bit of data, quantitative data about this from a survey that I conducted with Stephen Cohen, who you'll be meeting with next session. And this is from 2008, but I think it's still relevant today. We found that language correlates with all sorts of social characteristics, age, religiosity, denomination, etc. For example, we asked, do you use this word? And in this case, the word is macher, meaning a big shot from Yiddish. And we see that there's an age range here that older people are more likely to use it than younger people. That's what you would expect. The farther removed you are from the generation of immigrants who spoke Yiddish, the less likely they will be to use these words. But we see the opposite with some other words like drash, for example, where younger people are more likely to use it than older people. Same with staying by us, which is a Yiddish grammatical influence common in Orthodox communities. Younger people are more likely to use it than older people. We also see correlations with synagogue attendance. If the more people attend synagogue, the more likely they are to use many words. And in this case, this isn't even a synagogue word, it's tachlis, the kind of word you might say at a Jewish professional meeting. And this word correlates with synagogue attendance because people who attend synagogue more frequently are more likely to be in contact with Jews who are using words like this. We also see correlations with denomination. For example, the word davka, which is notoriously hard to translate, is more common among Orthodox communities, and you can see how it correlates with the other denominations there. Even pronunciations, whether you say Sukkos or Sukkot, correlates with denomination. And we also see that with the greeting between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Do you say Gemar Chatima Tova, or Gemar Chatima Tova, or Gemar Chasima Toiva, or do you not say it at all? That correlates a lot strongly with the denomination, and especially where people are on the modern Orthodox to Black Hat continuum. We also see correlations with time spent in Israel. The longer people have spent in Israel, the more likely they are to use certain words like balagan, for example. And even in what words mean, we see correlations. So the word schmooze, some people understand it to mean chat, we were just schmoozing, or some people understand it to mean network. I schmoozed him, or I schmoozed up the vice presidents, as you saw in that quote before. And this correlates with whether people are Jewish or not, and with how many Jewish friends that people have. The more Jewish friends you have, the more likely you are to understand this word to mean to chat rather than to network. Now, I talk about these correlations in my book, Becoming Frum, which focuses on Orthodox language, and in a website, the Jewish English Lexicon, which could be a useful resource for any Jewish professionals to find out who tends to use which kinds of words. There are over 1,000 words from Hebrew, Yiddish, and English and other languages listed on there. Now you might think, well, why do we need English words on there? Well, in Jewish nonprofit life in particular, we use certain words in distinctive ways, like continuity. That word has a distinctive meaning in Jewish professional discourse, just to give one example. So what does all this indicate? That Jews use language to show who they are, not just to show that they're Jewish, but to show that they're a certain type of Jew. We see this in material culture too. For example, if you have a Dodgers shirt or a Yankees hat in Hebrew letters, you're not just saying I'm a Dodgers fan or I'm a Yankees fan, you're saying I am Jewishly knowledgeable enough to have Hebrew words on my shirt or hat. Or if you have a shirt that says Shalom Y'all, you're indicating that you have an affinity to the South and that you have an affinity to Jews in the South. Even sexual orientation, we see this button that says kosher queer, and you can see how it uses the faux Hebrew lettering. Looks like Hebrew, but it's really English letters. And it uses the rainbow symbol of queer identity, and instead of OU, it says OQ. We see this in politics too. If you have a Hillary or a Trump sticker or phone case, for example, you're in Hebrew letters, you're not just saying, I'm supporting these candidates, you're also saying, I am Jewishly knowledgeable. And here are some of my favorite ones. You see Clinton, Barack Obama, Nixon, and then the last one says Gore for Al Gore. And then under George Bush, it says Gore nisht, which means not Gore in Yiddish. And it also means nothing in Yiddish. We also see this in people's ethnic orientation and their orientation toward their ancestral languages. So this shirt that says Burekas, not bagels, that person is indicating an affinity to Sephardic culture and a distance from Ashkenazi American Jewish culture. You also see the mensch and the oy vey and the Yiddish refrigerator magnets there. I know some of you can't see the screen, so I'm trying to narrate a little bit. We also have examples of this diversity when we look at summer camps. When I finished my project about Orthodox Jews, I decided I wanted to do another research project that looked at the diversity of American Jewish life in a particular setting. So I selected camps because they're fun and because I got to see a similar environment in many different denominations and movements. And this is a project that I am working on with my colleagues, Jonathan Krasner and Sharon Avni. And our book should be out in less than a year, I hope. We did a survey of camp directors and observed at 36 camps and interviewed many camp directors and staff members and campers and did historical research. And we visited camps of many different types: pluralistic, reform, conservative, Hebrew immersion, modern Orthodox, progressive Zionist, Israeli American, Russian American, Sephardic, eco-Jewish, Jews of color, Yeshivish Orthodox girls, and Chabad Orthodox. And what we found was a lot of diversity in how they use language. Here's a map just to show you where they got shifted a little bit, but most of our research was in the Northeast, Pennsylvania and New York, and in Southern California, but we also looked at camps in various parts of the country and one in Canada. So what did we find? Well, most camps have a bit of Hebrew, and some camps have a bit of other languages. So first I'll explain about the Hebrew. We found that some camps are interested in Hebrew proficiency and offer classes and immersion programs, but that's pretty rare. Most camps today don't do that. Instead, they use Hebrew infusion, which means incorporating Hebrew into the primarily English environment with the goals of connection to Hebrew and connection to Jews and Israel. So I'm going to give you some data now from that survey of 103 residential camp directors in North America. What we found was that the goals, we asked them about various goals and to what extent their camp had that as a goal. Most camps had Jewish connection as very important goals, and about half of the camps considered Hebrew infusion goals to be important, like strengthening knowledge of Hebrew songs and blessings and connection to Hebrew and connection to knowledge of select Hebrew words and phrases. But very few camps talked about Hebrew proficiency as important goals. And I'm going to give you now some data on the top right of your screen. You'll see the percentage of camps that said they have each of these things. So in this case, 100% of camps said they have Hebrew blessings, songs, or prayers. And a very large percentage also said they have names of groups at their camps in Hebrew, like this one at Camp Alonim, where they have the Sabras, the Tzofim, the Nachshonim, the Kochavim, the Chalutzim, and the seniors. We also have a large percentage of camps that have activity names in Hebrew. This one's from Camp Newman in California. And you can see that the schedule has mostly Hebrew words, but written in Hebrew letters and discussed otherwise in English sentences. So Boker Tov, Mifkad, Arochat Boker, Kabin Nikayon, chug, big block, aruchat zoharaim, and menucha, for example. Location names are also pretty common at camps. Here again, Camp Newman has things like the Chadar Ochel, the Mirpa'ah, the Beit Am, etc. And then most camps have some Hebrew words that are used within English sentences, and I divide this into Jewish life words and camp words. So Jewish life words include things like Shabbat Shalom, Birkat Hamazon, words that are used outside of camps as well. Boker Tov, Tikkun Olam, Tefillah. And this graph shows that most camp networks have pretty similar percentages of these words, a bit of diversity, but there's a lot of diversity when it comes to camp words, words that are used primarily in the camp setting, like Chadar Ochel, Nikayon, Machaneh, Mirpa'ah, Omanut, etc. And these words are used very frequently at Zionist camp networks like Ramah, B'nai Akiva, Young Judea, Havonim, Dror, and very infrequently at independent camps and pluralistic camps like JCC Association and Association of Independent Jewish Camps. So there is a lot of diversity in how these words are used. Just to give you an example of a sentence that includes a Jewish life word and a few camp words, here's a sentence from Wilshire Boulevard Temple Camps. After Birkat Hamazon, Chanichim and Madrichim go to the Teatron for Peulat Erev. So that means after Birkat Hamazon, grace after meals, campers and counselors go to the theater for evening activity. And you see that most of the main words in this sentence are in Hebrew. We also have many signs and placards at camps that are in Hebrew. And sometimes locations at camp are indicated with Hebrew signs in Hebrew letters, but sometimes in transliteration. Sometimes there are pedagogical signs intended to teach a word like labeling a chair kisei, or having a list of words that are used in the kitchen intended to teach some Hebrew words. And we also have skits and games that teach Hebrew words, often using words that sound similar in English and Hebrew, like there's a fork in mazleg. Mazleg means fork. And so that helps people remember the words. But more importantly, it helps people associate Hebrew with fun. Now, we're getting to practices that are much more rare at camp. Only 30% of camps report that they have announcements in Hebrew that are full sentences in Hebrew that require more knowledge of Hebrew. Only 20% of camps report that they have Hebrew classes, and only 12% report that they have a theatrical production in Hebrew. These are mostly Ramah camps. And only 8% of camps report that they have an immersion program, which is really intended to foster proficiency in Hebrew. In particular, Olansang Ruby Union Institute, Asrui in Wisconsin, and Camp Masad in Winnipeg in Canada have immersion programs. There are also Israeli-American programs that are intended to foster more proficiency in Hebrew, but this is a different kind of setting because they are kids who know Hebrew from their homes. So to summarize that, we have, most camps have the kinds of practices that I refer to as infusion practices, and only a few camps have these practices that are more about immersion with the intent to teach Hebrew. But we also have other languages represented at camps. Kinderring, for example, has some Yiddish. They teach Yiddish songs, and they have Yiddish culture sessions, and they call some things at the camp by their Yiddish names, a little bit less Hebrew than most camps. At Sephardic Adventure Camp, there is some Ladino. This is a camp near Seattle that's geared toward the great-grandchildren of immigrants from Rhodes and Turkey. And they use Ladino songs, and what you see on the screen is their mechitza, which was a banner in their color war. They get extra points in color war for using Ladino on their banners. And their camp song has some Ladino phrases in it. It's the Ojo de Chamsa, we're the king of all camps, having fun and praying with our counselors. And it must be known that the legend lives on, because we know that S.A.C. está muy bueno. So they use Ladino words in their songs as a way of fostering connection to this ancestral language that is an important part of their family's past. At Camp Gesher and other Russian American camps, we see Russian used in a slightly different way. At Ladino, the Sephardic Adventure Camp and Kinderring, Yiddish and Ladino were infused in ways that are similar to Hebrew infusion at most camps. But at Gesher, Russian is used in a different way. It's used when there's some Russian songs and some activities are in Russian, but usually they speak in English and then they switch to Russian when they want to get the kids quiet or when they want to provide extra care, like if a camper had hurt herself, then the counselor will comfort her in Russian, because this is the language that they are hearing from their parents at home. So to summarize, when we speak, write, and consume cultural products, we are sending messages about who we are and who we want to associate ourselves with. When we use Jewish language, we are presenting ourselves not only as Jews, but as certain types of Jews. And camps intentionally infuse Hebrew and other languages as a way of socializing campers to be particular types of Jews. Now, there are certainly practical implications for this conversation, and I hope that in our discussion groups right now, we'll be able to discuss how this relates to the work that you're doing. I know one of you mentioned in the beginning that this causes people to feel excluded. And I want you to get into the details of that. I want you to think about how you use Hebrew, Yiddish, and maybe even other languages in your program names, in your marketing. And when you do use words that are not English, do you translate them? Do you ever use words in Hebrew letters or only in transliteration? How do decisions about language affect how welcome people feel? And should you use different language depending on your target audience? Now, my goal in the talk today and in our discussion is certainly not to suggest that Jewish nonprofits shouldn't use any of this distinctive language. I actually think it's really important to have some of this distinctive language. But I also recognize that it can cause people to feel unwelcome or to feel like that particular program or organization is not intended for them if they don't have prior knowledge of those words. And so I would love to hear, well, first you're going to discuss in your groups, and then I would love to hear the kinds of things that you're thinking about all that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Professor Benor. You've given us so much food for thought. So here's what's going to happen now. You're going to be broken out into groups, as I described earlier. The questions will be chatted to you, so you don't have to jot them all down now. You'll have them in your small groups. If you do need any help, just use the chat function, chat to JPRO, and Erica will be able to help you. And lastly, you're going to get a note that invites you to come back 1 minute before you actually have to come back. So you can either click on the rejoin the session icon, or you can just continue speaking. And 1 minute after you see that, you'll be whisked back, whether you like it or not. So we hope you enjoy your small groups. You'll have about 8 minutes to chat. Welcome back, everyone. The magic of Zoom never fails to amaze.
It's really good.
Okay, Professor Benor, I think we have everyone back.
Great. So please unmute yourselves now, because I really, really want to hear what you talked about and what you'd like to share with the group. And just shout it out. Who wants to go first? Tell us about what you talked about.
I'll go first. Sarah, David and I talked a lot about how different places use Hebrew differently with different goals. So I shared that I grew up at a JCC camp where everything was named Hebrew, as you exemplified, but the actual general discussions and the way camp worked was in English. Whereas then I went to a youth group where everything was named in English, but Hebrew was much more profoundly used and richly used. So are people using, the cynic in me is that are people using Hebrew as a cover? Or is it just a different approach to how they can use language or not use language? I don't know what you found and how that connects to your research.
What do you mean use Hebrew as a cover?
Well, I'm calling a village Ohalim, but am I using it with any intentionality other than to say, okay, we covered the Hebrew checklist, right? As opposed to other areas where we don't have to call it something Hebrew, but everything we do has to be involved in a language with a lot more richness. I don't necessarily believe in what I'm saying. I'm wondering if that's...
Yeah, well, that's certainly a discourse that I heard at some camps. Some people were critical of the fact that many camps use Hebrew words for things around camp, saying that it's just an easy way to get the Jewish in there or to get the Israel in there, and that it doesn't really have substance and that it doesn't really teach Hebrew. And my response to that is that's not really the goal. The goal is not to teach Hebrew. The goal is to foster connection to Hebrew and through Hebrew to Israel and to Jews and to Judaism, and to make the camp a special place using Jewishness as a way of doing that. And so I actually think it serves a really important function. And tell us more about that youth group, though, that used Hebrew in more substantial ways. What do you mean by that?
Oh, like every single ruach would be in Hebrew. Sometimes the text study or discussions would be more in Hebrew. But when we referred to, aspects of our day, we would call it breakfast. We wouldn't call it arafat.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, I have a question, which is really, you were just noting that perhaps these camps are using Hebrew as you said, sort of as a way of creating connection. And I wonder about whether there's any English words that Jews can use or do use to create connection Jewishly. It's interesting to me that all of the language that you've just noted, a foreign language, and even sometimes it's not necessarily an originally, well, actually Ladino, Yiddish, Russian, I guess, is the only example where it doesn't have a Jewish modification to it. But I'm just wondering about that question and whether these Jewish camps are actually using Hebrew, not necessarily just to make connections to Hebrew or Israel, but rather to create Jewish language in the same way that perhaps a summer camp that is a Girl Scout camp uses Girl Scout words, and how that works.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going on. And that's kind of the point of my talk today, that we're not just talking about Jews using different languages, we're talking about Jews using English with influences from other languages. And I see Jewish English in America as similar to diaspora communities around the world. When we think about Yiddish and Ladino, those are really exceptions in the history of the diaspora because they were maintained for centuries away from the place that they originated. So Yiddish originated in Germanic lands, and then when Jews moved from there to Slavic lands, they kept their Germanic language. And same with Ladino, when Jews were expelled from Spain, they kept their Spanish language in the Ottoman Empire and North Africa. And so those are really exceptions. But if you think about Judeo-Arabic or Judeo-Tajik, which is of the Bukharan Jews, or Judeo-Malayalam of the Jews in southern India, those are all distinctively Jewish versions of the local language, right? So they're able to function in the local language and conduct their activities primarily in that language with distinctive features. Now, in some of those cases, those features are so significant that it's maybe not even intelligible anymore to their non-Jewish neighbors. The way that we talk English in America usually is intelligible to our non-Jewish neighbors, but sometimes not. If you look at some Orthodox communities, some of them will use English that's so influenced by Yiddish and Hebrew and Aramaic that it really isn't intelligible. And there are subtitles in some movies about Orthodox Jews that are in Jewish English, right? So I do think it's really important to think about this as a Jewish variety of English. Other thoughts from your breakout groups?
I'll share something that we were talking about in our breakout group to see if others want to comment. I was thinking about how, as a professional, there are little choices I make all the time about how to present myself. Like when I write an email on Friday, do I write Shabbat Shalom or not? You know, how do I be authentically myself, not alienating to the person who I'm engaging with? I don't know about organizations sort of having policies about this, but I certainly have had a lot of non-Jewish colleagues, and, you know, sort of how do we engage with one another, being authentically ourselves, and being really cognizant of either who our interlocutor is, or maybe we don't know. So, you know, I'd love to hear comments from anybody about that.
Yeah, I love that question. It's interesting to think about what is an authentic representation of myself, because, and this is not just true for Jews, but for anyone, everybody speaks differently when they speak to different people, right? So if you're a kid, you're going to speak differently to grownups than you do to your friends. And if you're, obviously when you talk to someone that you're much closer to, you speak differently, right? But this is even more the case for Jews who have this extra layer of Hebrew or Ladino or whatever other language we're using, that we need to decide how much we can use. So when I did that survey with Stephen Cohen, hi Steve, we asked about the words in a way that enabled them to indicate how they use them differently for different people. So we said, how do you refer to the springtime holiday? And the choices were Passover, Pesach, or Pesach, but we asked about it in 3 different ways. When you're speaking to Jews who are engaged in Jewish life, when you're speaking to Jews who are not very engaged in Jewish life, and when you're speaking to non-Jews. And we got very different answers for those different things. So I personally will say Pesach when talking to Jews who are highly engaged in Jewish life, and Passover when speaking to other Jews and to non-Jews. And so I think that's a really important way of thinking about it, that there isn't just one authentic way. I guess maybe my saying Pesach is the most authentic because maybe that's what I would say with my family, but it's also authentic to speak differently to different people.
So that's, first of all, Sarah and JPRO, congratulations on both the Kala and the Chassan for a wonderful, a wonderful ceremony that under the chuppah of JPRO. Anyway, if you don't understand, it's okay. But that's my point. My point is, I'm really interested, and I'm really, please don't take this as critical, but more as analytical. I'm interested in the first comment, and then I think the more recent ones, which looks at the use of this language as off-putting and alienating and unwelcoming people. And my take on this language, and Sarah will speak for herself, is that no, it represents inclusiveness, in that it helps signal participation in various sub-communities. And if we're going to have a strong Jewish people, we're going to have to need strong Jewish sub-communities. So learning how to speak in those communities and then venturing to do it is actually a good thing. Of course, with sensitivity to others. My last comment is this. My wife is a Reform rabbi, and she's had me speak to her older Reform congregants, and she actually sits there and she translates for me, because when I spoke and when I originally spoke to them about davening in shul, she said when we pray in synagogue or temple, and she translates, and then I learned to have Sarah's great sensitivity to different people and to speak Reform to the Reform and Chabad to the Chabad and myself to working class ethnic Jews from Brooklyn. So my question is, how do we balance these two? And also, I'm still struggling with this. I'll learn something maybe. Where do we come up with this, I would say, exaggerated sense of exclusion and unwelcoming, either as happening, which I wouldn't, God forbid, I wouldn't want to hurt people, but as consequential for Jewish life, about which I'm not so sure. So that, answer any way you want. I mean, I don't care.
Yeah, I want to hear your answers to that, and I will refine that or add to that by saying, Can you think of specific instances where your organization or you personally used distinctive language and then felt that it was unwelcoming or somehow off-putting to people?
Hi. So we were trying to pull an example from Pittsburgh where some marketing materials a couple years ago from the Federation or from the film festival used the term bubby, and that caused a bit of an uproar, but we can't exactly remember why.
An uproar. So you think it was people who felt that that word was too Ashkenormative?
Well,
No.
that's my favorite word, but I don't think that was used at the time.
Okay.
I thought the way we used it was not appropriate or something, but that's why we can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the use of the word itself.
It was a lady who complained.
And we did have someone used the term bagel Jew in a meeting, which also did not go, I remember distinctly did not go over well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But, you know, we were talking about the power of this idea of the situational code switching can be really powerful. If, for example, you are, let's say, the executive of a federation, the ability to, you know, change your language based on your audiences really shows in a positive way how much you care about different parts of the community.
Nice.
So as a professional, it could be a very powerful, positive tool.
Nice. I like that. And there's a question here from Daniel Infeld. Did you interview or survey any non-Jewish staff? I wonder if that could be a window into how distinctive language is used pedagogically, since they would theoretically have to be trained. Great question. This is something I'm actually thinking about doing research on in the future. I'm calling it tentatively Jew adjacent, not just looking at non-Jewish staff in Jewish organizations, but also non-Jews who are married to Jews or connected to Jews, and how they experience distinctive Jewish language. But I would like to hear from all of you about how, if and how you train your non-Jewish staff. Does anyone have a list of words that they give to new non-Jewish staff members so they can learn the lingo of your organization? And theoretically, this wouldn't just be things like Shabbat Shalom and Boker Tov, but also the English lingo of your organization, whether it's campaign or lay leader, or there are so many different aspects.
Macher.
Macher, yeah.
Macher. I would say that I would take Sarah's call for a list, and I've actually had the same idea that we should have a list, and it's not just to train the less Jewishly educated or incorporated, and that would be some Jews as well, obviously, but to turn it around to teach insider. Given my sense before that we need insider language. It's good for the Jews to have insider language, to teach insider language to the insiders, so that we all can participate and use the same 1,000 Yiddish, Hebrew, Jewish communal words, so that, you know, we know what they were. Charles Liebman 20 years ago said, whoever doesn't know what 52% means is not active in Jewish life. And you're all looking at me, what?
Yeah, didn't they revise that to 47? And by they,
I revised it downward. I was wrong. Yeah. But some people are smiling. For those of you who don't know, in the 1990s, we had the mistaken belief that 52% of American Jews were marrying non-Jews from the 1990 population study. And today, the closest competitive number, nowhere near as famous, is 72, which is the percent of non-Orthodox Jews who have been recently marrying non-Jews. But anyway, right. I think it'd be great for JPRO, and I know Sarah's going to help, and I'll help Sarah, to come up with a list of commonly used insider words. Yeah. For everybody to learn, for whatever reason, and including not avoiding alienating people and being sensitive to their needs.
Yeah, so I would say there's a nice article by Deborah Lipstadt that says that Jewish professionals should know 1,000 milim, 1,000 Hebrew words, and specifically the kinds of words that we use in our everyday lives, not just the kinds of words that you would need to get around in Israel, but the words that are part of Jewish English. And I would say I'm going to share my screen again because I want to show you the Jewish English lexicon, which can be useful for that. So here it is. And it's Jewish, just Google Jewish English lexicon and you'll find it. And you can go down and see the types of people who tend to use the word. And then I have specifically organizations, people involved in professional in a professional or volunteer capacity with Jewish nonprofit organizations. And then it has a bunch of words from Hebrew, but then also a bunch of words from English, like birthright and CCAR, some of the alphabet soup. I'm gonna even filter it further to get just the English words, because I know we talked about that a little bit and I want you to see the kinds of words. So I mentioned continuity, but something like convener or day school or engagement, ever dying people, federation, these kinds of words are part of our Jewish English lingo that people need to know, give, get, right? Jewish geography, Jewish professional, lay leader, mission, et cetera, et cetera. So, or even pew. When people say the word pew, they mean something very different when they're in a Jewish organization than most people in the world mean when they say the word pew. So, and also if you look, you can use this to filter by various things. In this case, I just filtered by Jews who are engaged in religious life and textual Hebrew. And wait a second. There we go. So you can see a bunch of words that people would be expected to know if they were engaged in Jewish life. And at the Zellico School of Jewish Nonprofit Management at Hebrew Union College, where I teach, we recently got rid of our Hebrew requirement because we felt that it wasn't particularly useful the way that it was done. And we actually replaced it with a class on applied Jewish wisdom, which I teach. And part of that class is the students have to learn a bunch of Hebrew words. They have to be able to read Hebrew, print and cursive, and they have to be familiar with many of the Hebrew words that are used as part of American Jewish life. So I think we're out of time. Is there?
This is unless there's a final comment, I think this is a perfect moment to say thank you. Going once, going twice. Okay.
Hashem Dank, Toda Rabba.
Professor Benor, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. And I really want to invite and encourage you all to join us next Wednesday, May 30th, for the final session of our series with Professor Stephen M. Cohen.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. We hope to see you, and I wish you all a wonderful week.